In front of a beautiful house with an immaculate garden stood Pierre, a 14-year-old boy in a wheelchair. He looked at the house with a nervous expression, as if something he had always wanted was there, but at the same time, he was afraid to find it. Beside him, Raphael, his caregiver, was also apprehensive, but being older, he tried not to show it to give the boy strength. Raphael nervously said, "Do you think she'll accept me? I've wanted to find her for years, but if my mother really wanted me, she would never have abandoned me. Maybe she doesn't want to see me and might even be angry with me for knocking on her door." With a calm and serene look, Raphael replied, "She's your mother. I'm sure she had her reasons for giving you up. We don't know what happened that led her to leave you, so don't be nervous. You're a great kid and I'm sure she'll like you. I'm here by your side and I won't leave. You can count on me for anything." With Raphael's words, Pierre felt calmer. With his frail and thin hands, he began to turn the wheels of his chair. Raphael walked slowly beside him, never taking his eyes off the boy who was sweating nervously. They both noticed the beautiful garden, well maintained with various types of roses. The front of the house was lovely and, while exuding simplicity in its details, also had an air of refinement and sophistication. The boy in front of the door rang the bell. When the sound of the chime echoed through the house, he felt his heart race. For a second he thought about turning back, but hearing footsteps approaching the door, he realized it was too late to return. The door opened and a woman, around 40 years old, appeared. She had a kind face, with a soft and welcoming smile. "Good morning, how can I help you?" the woman asked. Pierre stared at her for a few seconds, his voice was stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say anything. Then, the feelings that couldn't escape his mouth found their way to his eyes and overflowed. The boy cried, but his face remained motionless, as if paralyzed. "Oh my God," the woman exclaimed. "Are you okay?" she asked, concerned about the situation. Raphael hadn't planned on saying anything, just accompanying the boy to see if he would be okay, but seeing that scene, he had to speak. "Ma'am, we've come from very far away. Pierre has been looking for you for a long time, that's why he's so emotional." The woman still didn't understand what was happening, she didn't know who these two were, and the boy crying was making her worried. Pierre finally gathered the courage and spoke. "Mother, I've always wanted to meet you. I've been looking for you for so many years. My father always talked about you, but he never let me meet you. All I knew was your name, Rosa. I've always wanted to know you, Mom." Hearing the word mother followed by her name, Rosa froze and began to cry as well. Tears streamed down her face, but she remained still in front of them. Raphael helped Pierre wipe away his tears, and while doing so, Rosa said, "Please come in. We have a lot to talk about." Pierre and Raphael entered Rosa's house. The living room matched the front of the house, with refinement and elegance. All the objects were neatly arranged, and the light tones and plants brought a sense of calm and peace to the home. "I'll get some cookies and juice, please wait a moment," Rosa said. Pierre was now calmer, he had finally found his mother, the person he had most wanted to meet. Rosa returned with some homemade cookies she had made herself and 2 glasses of passion fruit juice. "Drink some of this juice. You're very nervous, it'll help calm you down," she said with a tone of calm and compassion. Raphael sat on the comfortable couch and Pierre positioned his wheelchair next to him. The cookies and juice were delicious, making Pierre even more emotional to have a mother who could cook so well. "It's the first time someone has done something for me since my father passed away. I've always had to make my own food," the boy said with an emotional voice. Rosa smiled. "And you can have more if you want." The two exchanged a compassionate smile. But then Rosa asked, "Please tell me how you found me. I know you have a lot to say." Pierre looked at the floor with a sad expression and said, "It wasn't easy to find you, Mom. If it weren't for Raphael, I would never have found you. I've been through so much." Rosa interrupted him. "Please tell me everything that happened until you got here. I have plenty of time." Then she smiled, making the boy feel more welcome. 15 years ago, Pierre was born. His father, Lucas, raised him with much love and care. Pierre was the reason for his life and the motivation to keep going. Until Pierre was 4 years old, it was just Lucas and him, but then Carla appeared in their lives. Lucas and Carla were a couple deeply in love, and soon Carla moved in with them. The couple didn't have much money and lived in a humble rented house. But to anyone looking from the outside, they seemed like a happy couple. Pierre remembers a bit of that time, running through the streets, playing soccer with his friends, and feeling his legs ache from running so much in the fields. But one day something changed. His father slowly began to change his behavior toward Carla and Pierre. He was still the same, but his smiles were dimmer and his gaze was always tired. Whenever they asked what had happened or what was wrong, Lucas would change the subject and tell a joke to distract them for a while. Carla and Pierre stopped asking what had happened and just waited for Lucas to be ready to tell them. However, Pierre noticed that Carla had also changed. She still treated him well, just like his father, but she seemed lifeless. She didn't even smile at him or her husband anymore. This made Pierre sad and confused. He was just a child at the time, but he knew they were hiding something from him. One day, while playing soccer on a field with his friends, the goalkeeper kicked the ball and one of the players kicked it far away. The ball landed on the other side of the road, a rarely used road. All the boys ran after the ball, but Pierre was the fastest. He smiled as he grabbed the ball and started walking back to the field because he was very tired. Unfortunately, distracted by the rarely used road, Pierre didn't notice the car coming toward him. The driver, who was using his phone at the time, didn't see Pierre either. The boys heard a loud crash and the screeching sound of tires at high speed. It was the driver who, realizing he had hit a child, sped up to avoid being caught. The boys screamed for help and some of them ran to their homes to find an adult who could assist. Pierre was taken to the hospital by ambulance. Lucas and Carla couldn't stop crying, fearing they might lose Pierre. The boy spent a month in the hospital in a coma. After that time, he woke up confused. He didn't remember the accident or how he ended up there. His father was by his side, crying tears of joy that his son had finally woken up. "Dad, what am I doing here?" Pierre asked in a weak and confused voice. Lucas, still crying, replied, "You had an accident, son, and you're in the hospital. But everything will be fine now, you'll be okay." "I can't get up," Pierre said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's because you're weak, son. You've been sleeping for a month and that's why your legs are weak. But soon you'll be able to run again, just like you always loved to do, and play soccer with all your friends," Lucas responded, trying to comfort his son. Pierre smiled at his father, who, exhausted, fell asleep again. Unfortunately, what Pierre had was not just weakness in his legs. Later tests revealed a spinal injury that prevented him from moving his legs. The news was devastating for Lucas and Carla, but strangely, Pierre remained strong. He played in his wheelchair, joking that he would now be a driver and that he would install turbo boosters on the wheels so he could go faster than everyone. Lucas was moved by how strong his son was. For anyone else, losing the ability to walk could be life-shattering, but Pierre never shed a tear. He even made light of the situation. "My son," Lucas said, "I wish I had half the strength you do. You are my pride and joy. Know that I love you." After a period of recovery in the hospital, Pierre finally returned home. He noticed that his father and Carla now seemed happier, but he still sensed that something was wrong. Before the accident, they had both been acting strange and then they changed. This calmed Pierre, who for a moment thought that whatever had been bothering them was resolved. Pierre adapted well to the wheelchair and could even play with his friends within the possible limits. While playing with one of his best friends, he asked, "Pierre, what happened to the car that hit you?" The boy quickly replied, "Nothing. They couldn't find the person who hit me. They don't even know if it was a man or a woman. My dad said this area is pretty poor, so there aren't many cameras on the streets. That's why they couldn't find out who it was, and maybe they never will." Incredibly, this didn't faze Pierre, who continued living his life normally. Carla and Lucas weren't sure if he was just a strong kid or if his young age brought a certain innocence regarding the challenges he might face in the future. None of these events shook Pierre, but something was coming that even his iron will couldn't withstand. One night after waking up from his bed, Pierre heard noises coming from the living room. He realized it was a muffled argument between Carla and Lucas. The boy silently got into his wheelchair and slowly rolled to a spot where he couldn't be heard or seen. Carla and Lucas were in the living room arguing in harsh but quiet tones so as not to wake Pierre. "You have to stay with him, Carla, I beg you." "He doesn't have," Lucas spoke with a mix of anger and fear. I fell in love with you, Lucas. I lived this life by your side just for you, not for him. I'm just his stepmother. I never wanted to raise your son. I don't even think about having a child of my own. Pierre has a mother, he can very well stay with her. But you don't even say where she is." A chill ran down Pierre's spine. He had asked his father about his mother over the years many times, but he never said anything about her, only that she had left and abandoned them. Pierre didn't know how to interpret this. He didn't know if his mother had died or if she had just left him with his father. The boy was confused and scared by his father's words. "You have to stay with him, Carla," these words echoed in his mind. Did this mean his father was also going to abandon him, just like his mother? Pierre didn't know what to do. The situation didn't make sense to him, but it deeply affected him. Losing the use of his legs was tough, but losing his father's love was too much for the little boy. The argument ended and Pierre silently returned to his bed. That night he didn't sleep well. The next day Pierre found his father at the table, deep in thought, holding his head. The boy went up to him and, without hesitation, said, "Dad, are you going to abandon me like my mom did?" Lucas's eyes widened and he moved toward his son, speaking in a firm tone. "My son, I would never do that. You are my life. I exist only because of you. I would never abandon you." "Why are you saying that?" Pierre asked. "I heard you and Carla arguing. You said she had to stay with me, but she didn't want to," Pierre said sadly, unable to look his father in the eyes. Lucas received his son's confession like a shock. He wasn't prepared to reveal the truth, but he couldn't leave his son in that state. "Son, I love you. A lot is going on. I wanted to keep you out of it so you wouldn't suffer. I'm sick and I'm afraid that one day I won't be able to stay by your side. That's why I told Carla to stay with you. I would never abandon you." Still sad, Pierre asked, "Are you going to die, Dad?" Then the boy, who had been as strong as a rock, a wall that no negative emotion could penetrate, broke down in tears at the thought of losing his father. Lucas tried to comfort him. "Son, I'm getting treatment. It's the second time this illness has come back. I'm sure I'll be able to beat it." Lucas and Pierre hugged. Both were emotional and hoped with all their might for the best. Days passed and Lucas seemed more and more exhausted. He tried to appear strong in front of his son, but Pierre noticed that his father was struggling not to let him suffer. Pierre, who was already loving, became an even more dedicated son. He made breakfast, cleaned the house, and studied to show his best grades to his father. "You are my pride, son," Lucas would say. After a few months, Lucas, who was thin, pale, and bald, called Pierre. "Son, come here. I have something to show you. Look at this box. It has many pictures of me when I was younger and of you when you were a baby." Lucas and Pierre talked for hours. The father shared many moments of his life through the photos in that box. Lucas felt that his time to leave was near, so he wanted to spend as much time as possible with his son. Pierre noticed that despite the many photos, none of them showed a woman who could be his mother. But one photo, which his father didn't show him and was somewhat hidden in the box, depicted Lucas embracing a young woman who appeared to be around his age. Pierre picked up the photo and, with a sparkle in his eyes and a smile on his lips, asked, "Is this my mother?" Caught by surprise and not even remembering that photo, Lucas looked at Pierre. The boy who had been through so much in recent years showed a contagious joy as he looked at that picture. Speaking softly and with a sad look, Lucas said, "Yes, she is your mother. Her name is Rosa. She's an amazing woman." However, a severe cough struck him right after. Carla, seeing that her husband wasn't well, took him to the hospital, where the doctors admitted him for several days. Lucas was hospitalized and rarely received visits from Pierre because the doctors didn't approve of such a young child entering a hospital setting. It was too dangerous for him. We know it can be cruel to separate a father from his son, the doctors said, trying to protect Pierre's health, but if he catches any bacteria or virus, it could be fatal for the boy. The young boy spent his days alone at home, holding the photo of his mother and praying for his father's return. However, one day the news he feared most arrived: Lucas had passed away. He fought for days, but the illness took his life. Pierre received condolences from many people, but nothing he heard eased his pain. He stayed by his father's coffin the whole time until he finally returned home. After Lucas's passing, Pierre was left alone with his stepmother, Carla. She treated him well and showed affection, caring for the boy's emotional well-being. However, this didn't last long. The pain of grief still burned strongly in her chest, and Carla could no longer hold back her tears in front of Pierre. Over time, the woman seemed to become an empty shell without the presence of her beloved husband. Months later, Pierre noticed Carla looking worried in the living room. She was staring at several papers and whispering, "How am I going to pay for all this?" What Pierre didn't know was that Carla didn't have a steady job, and after losing Lucas, her financial situation had become even worse. On a dark night, where the moonlight was the main source of brightness, Carla said she wasn't feeling very well. "Pierre, I need to go to the hospital. Grab some of your things and come with me." The two of them caught a ride and went to the most distant hospital in the city. When they arrived at the hospital's backyard, an isolated area with little lighting, Carla said, "Stay here. I'm going to see the doctor." Pierre found it strange that he couldn't go inside, but since it wasn't the first time he had been denied entry to a hospital, he didn't argue. Carla then walked to the front of the hospital and disappeared after passing the wall. Pierre waited. Seconds turned into minutes, and minutes turned into hours until the day began to break. The sun was rising and it was warm, but Pierre felt a chill in his heart. The back door of the hospital opened and a man came out. "What are you doing here, kid? Where are your parents?" "My name is Raphael. What's yours?" Pierre then told Raphael everything that had happened, and he quickly understood the situation. "Everything's going to be all right, kid. I'm going to help you." Raphael felt a pang in his heart when he saw the boy's sad face, especially in a wheelchair. Raphael took him to the employees' cafeteria, where everyone was shocked and outraged by the young boy's abandonment. Raphael served Pierre a meal which he devoured with great hunger. Some time later, the police arrived, along with Child Protective Services. Carla had left Pierre at the hospital because the next day they were going to be evicted from their home due to unpaid rent. Carla had combined this fact with her desire not to keep Pierre. She only wanted Lucas, but her beloved had passed away. Unable to summon the courage to tell the boy that she wouldn't stay with him and instead of putting him up for adoption, Carla, in a cowardly and thoughtless act, decided it was better to abandon him at the hospital. "Someone will take care of him here," she thought before leaving Pierre alone in that place. The police found Carla a few days later living at her mother's house. She was charged and received a few months of jail time for child abandonment. Meanwhile, Pierre found himself within the walls of an orphanage. The place was full of children, some nice and some not so nice. Pierre took almost nothing from his former home, just the box with his father's photos. He slept holding the photo of his parents and kept imagining what his life would be like if both of them were still there with him. A few days after entering the orphanage, Pierre received a visit he never expected. It was Raphael, the nurse who had helped him at the hospital. Hello, Pierre, Raphael said with a broad smile on his face. I brought some things for you. I hope they help. They're clothes and a new wheelchair. This one of yours is very old. Pierre smiled at the sight of a familiar face. His entire life had changed, and any contact with someone friendly made him smile. For days, Raphael visited the boy. Then one day he brought big news for Pierre. Pierre, Raphael began, I left my old job at that hospital. I spoke with the director of the orphanage and found out they were hiring for the infirmary since the previous nurse retired. I submitted my resume and they hired me. Pierre let out a shout of joy and hugged Raphael. Did you do this for me? The boy asked. Raphael paused to think and then replied. I did it for you, but also because it's better for me here and I'll earn more. Pierre looked into his eyes and said, I'll feel much more at home with you here. Raphael smiled back, happy with what he heard. What Raphael was hiding was that he did it solely for Pierre. He wanted to be able to help the boy in any way possible and be more present in his life. The new job at the orphanage paid half of what he earned at the hospital, but what he truly wanted was to see Pierre happy. Raphael's presence made everything much easier for Pierre, and over time, he was able to smile again. But life had another surprise for him. While he was alone, strolling through the orphanage garden, someone called his name. It was Carla, his stepmother. Carla had a sad and regretful look in her eyes. What are you doing here? Pierre asked. First of all, I'm sorry for that day, Carla said, her voice trembling. Losing Lucas was too much for me. I should have been braver and called Child Protective Services to take care of you, but I didn't have the courage. You have his eyes, and just looking into them hurts me. Pierre remained silent, but Carla continued. I spent a few months in prison for what I did. When I got out, they gave me some things that were in the house, like documents and some furniture, nothing too important. But there was something I had forgotten. Before your father died, he wrote a letter. He made me promise not to open it and to give it to you. In the midst of the grief and the funeral, I ended up losing the letter, but when I got out of prison, they gave me everything that was inside the house. Along with all that, there was the letter. I couldn't keep my promise and read it yesterday. Here it is, I'm sure it will interest you. Once again, I'm sorry. After handing over the letter, Carla turned around and disappeared, just like before. Pierre opened the letter and it read. Son, as I write this, I feel that I will soon be leaving. I'm worried about your future. I recently realized that Carla wasn't the right woman to take care of you. However, there is someone who will undoubtedly take good care of you, your mother. I'm sorry for hiding her whereabouts all this time, but it was necessary. Your mother's name is Rosa. She lives at 123 Rua das Flores. She is a person with a big heart, and I'm sure she will give you everything you need. After reading the letter, Pierre cried from missing his father, but at the same time, he was happy to finally know where his mother was. Carla had mixed this issue with not wanting to stay with Pierre. She only wanted Lucas, but her beloved had passed away. Returning to the present, Pierre finished telling Rosa the whole story. Rosa stood up suddenly and tears wouldn't stop falling from her face. Excuse me, I just need a minute, Rosa said before going to the kitchen to cry. She didn't know what to do. After a few minutes she returned, hugged Pierre and said, You are a strong boy. I've never met anyone with as much determination as you. Pierre smiled upon hearing these kind words from his mother. She returned to the couch and sat down. I also have something to tell you. I hope you understand my side of the story. Pierre and Raphael listened attentively to what Rosa was about to say. Many years ago, Rosa was a young woman about to graduate from medical school. At the time, she was dating Cassio. The two had known each other since childhood, and when they announced that they were dating, no one was surprised. It was as if they were meant for each other. Rosa was finishing medical school, while Cassio had not yet managed to get into any college and was struggling to find a job. Rosa always helped him. Cassio, you'll find a job and graduate. I'm sure of it, my love, she would say to him. However, Cassio became a quiet and increasingly distant man. Rosa tried to understand her boyfriend's side. It couldn't have been easy for him to go through all that. Rosa did everything she could to support him, but Cassio continued to act strangely and distantly. One day when she got home, she overheard Cassio talking on the phone. I'll be with you soon, my dear. I miss you. Rosa was shocked to hear those words, but she swallowed her anger to confirm that she wasn't going crazy. When Cassio noticed Rosa's presence, he froze and greeted her warmly. Hello, my love. I didn't notice you come in. How was school? Rosa gave a fake smile and replied. It was great, my love, but I'm so tired. Could you make dinner? I'm really exhausted. Yeah, of course, darling, I'll do it right now, Cassio said as he went to the kitchen, leaving his cell phone behind. That was exactly what Rosa wanted. She called the last number dialed on his phone, which was saved as Antonio, gas installer. But when the call was answered, a young woman's voice responded. Hi, love, already missing me? You should sleep here tonight and make up an excuse for Rosa. Rosa hung up the phone and walked to the kitchen. Honey, I need you to pick up a few things from the grocery store, Rosa asked. Cassio found it strange, but he complied with the request. An hour later he returned home, but found the doors locked. Rosa, what's going on? He shouted. Rosa looked through the crack in the door and simply said, I know everything, you traitor. Then she went back inside. While Cassio was at the grocery store, Rosa had urgently called a locksmith and changed all the locks in the house. The following days were tough for Rosa. She missed Cassio even though he had done what he did. Amid tears and sleepless nights, Rosa felt a strong dizziness and went to the hospital. In the reception area she was very dizzy and nauseous. She managed to say only 2 words to the receptionist before fainting. When she woke up, the doctor, with a sad smile, said, Congratulations, you're pregnant. A what? Rosa asked in disbelief. Under different circumstances, this would have been the news she most desired. Rosa had always dreamed of becoming a mother, but at that moment she was confused and lost. Carrying the child of an ex-boyfriend who had betrayed her did not feel right. One day her neighbor, an 80-year-old woman, saw Rosa and noticed her growing belly. Rosa, my God, you're pregnant. There's no greater blessing for a woman than becoming a mother, the woman said. Rosa thanked her but remained sad. My dear, what happened? The woman asked. Rosa opened up and told her everything that had happened. My dear, I know the situation is difficult, but remember that this child you're carrying is also yours, not just that man's who betrayed you. I'm sure God has a great plan for you. He has a plan for all of us. Cheer up, you'll get through this, the woman said. After that conversation, Rosa felt a little happier and renewed. She tried to see life from a more positive angle. She had only a few months left before finishing medical school. She was already working and, upon graduation, had a job secured along with a salary increase. I will raise him. I can raise a child on my own, Rosa thought positively. At 5 months pregnant, Rosa was watering her garden when she began to feel severe pain in her abdomen. Is it time already? It can't be, she thought, worried. After her neighbors heard her cries of pain, an ambulance arrived and took her to the hospital. Rosa didn't understand what was happening, but she felt that something was wrong. After several hours at the hospital, she received the worst news of her life: she had lost the baby. The doctor, with a sad expression, said, I'm sorry. We did everything we could, but you had a hemorrhage and unfortunately your uterus was also compromised. You won't be able to have children again. The 2 pieces of news devastated Rosa. She shut herself inside her home and hardly went out. Neighbors and relatives did everything they could to bring her back into society, but Rosa was deeply depressed. After much insistence from friends and relatives, she saw a psychologist with whom she began to have regular sessions. She tried to pick herself up, but every step seemed more difficult. Her neighbor always visited her, bringing sweets, cakes, lunch, or anything that might make Rosa happy. One day the neighbor asked if Rosa had any food or clothes she wasn't using. Why do you ask, Mrs. Marina? Rosa questioned. The elderly woman raised a small bag full of clothes in good condition but that she no longer wore. The clothes were for charity. Mrs. Marina explained that she visited an institution every week that was in great need of help. Even though she was discouraged, Rosa searched her wardrobe for old but still good clothes, food, and even an old doll. She gave everything to Mrs. Marina, who now had 2 full bags in her hands. Mrs. Marina, can you carry all that? Rosa asked, worried about the weight she was carrying. One step at a time I can manage, my dear, replied Mrs. Marina with a smile. Despite her condition, Rosa couldn't let an 80-year-old woman carry such a heavy bag. I'll drive you. Let's go in my car, Rosa said. Mrs. Marina smiled and accepted. It was the first time Rosa had left her house in 3 months. After 10 minutes on the road, the two arrived at a charity institution that sheltered people with cancer who came from rural areas for treatment in the city and had nowhere to stay. They were very humble people. Rosa felt her heart tighten when she saw children in wheelchairs, elderly people in terminal conditions, and mothers carrying their sick children. She realized that her pain wasn't the only one in the world. When delivering the clothes and food, one moment brought Rosa to tears. A little girl, about 6 years old, approached and gazed at the doll Rosa had donated. The doll had no hair, just like the girl. Rosa knelt down to the child's level and handed her the doll. Here, it's yours. Take good care of her, Rosa said. The girl hugged Rosa and then walked away, playing with the doll. Rosa cried. That hug allowed her to release everything that had been bottled up inside her. From that day on, Rosa became increasingly involved in charitable work. It made her feel alive and, at the same time, made the lives of people in need a little easier. One day, as she was leaving a charity bazaar, Rosa encountered 2 women handing out flyers about the importance of donating blood and bone marrow. You can save a life, they said. Rosa decided to donate both blood and bone marrow that very day. For months, her life continued as usual until she received a phone call. Good morning, Ms. Rosa. You are a match for a bone marrow donation. The news brought Rosa great joy. She could really save someone's life. Rosa went to the hospital and after a simple procedure, she made the bone marrow donation. Her days continued as normal and Rosa was gradually recovering from everything she had been through. On a beautiful sunny day, someone knocked on her door. When Rosa opened it, she found a man she had never seen before. Good morning, how can I help you? Rosa asked. Good morning, the man replied. I know this might seem strange, but I just wanted to thank you for what you did for me. Rosa was confused. Sorry, my name is Lucas. I'm the one who received your bone marrow. Rosa's eyes widened in shock. She thought the donor's identity was kept secret. Lucas explained. I know it's wrong, but I had some friends who accessed the system and found out you were the donor. I felt such deep gratitude toward this person and I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I owe you my life. Thank you so much. Lucas began to leave, but Rosa called out to him, almost shouting, Don't you want to come in? I made some cookies. Lucas smiled and accepted. It would be a pleasure, Ms. Rosa. Don't call me MS, we're the same age and I'm not even 30 yet, Rosa said with a smile. The conversation was pleasant. Rosa and Lucas realized they had much more in common than they had imagined. Lucas shared his entire life story, from the discovery of his illness to his recovery. Rosa also shared her story and the tragic loss of her baby. Lucas listened intently, his heart heavy. I'm so sorry. You would have been a wonderful mother, he said. Today, that's what I want most in the world, to be a mother. When I see a child calling someone mom, my heart aches, and sometimes I cry. I had already bought clothes for my baby and chosen a name for him, but unfortunately he couldn't come into this world. Rosa stood up in tears and showed Lucas a tiny baby outfit. I made this myself. I even embroidered his name on it. Pierre. Yes, Rosa replied, crying. Sharing these moments brought the two even closer, and soon they fell in love. Their relationship seemed perfect, and Rosa felt she had never been so happy. However, the happiness was short-lived. One day Lucas came to Rosa's house and spoke sadly. Rosa, I know you're going to hate me, but my ex-girlfriend Livia got in touch with me. She's pregnant. I didn't know. I'm so sorry to have to put you through this. Rosa was shocked by the news but realized that Lucas was sincere in his words. He was torn between his love for Rosa and the child who was about to be born. Even so, Rosa encouraged him to choose his child. He needs you. I would do anything to have my child back. Raise your child, Rosa said. Lucas and Rosa said their goodbyes with a kiss, both of them crying. Before Lucas left, Rosa handed him the baby outfit she had made for her son. Take it. I have to move on. Give it to your son when he's born. I know I can't have children, but maybe one day I'll adopt when I'm healed from all of this. You can take the name off, Rosa suggested. No, Lucas said. I'm not taking the name off. Pierre is a beautiful name. Lucas left and they lost contact. For Rosa, it was too painful to stay close to Lucas, knowing he would marry another woman and raise a child with her. Pierre was stunned after hearing Rosa's story. But why did my dad lie saying that you're my mother? Why would he do that? It doesn't make sense. Rosa looked at him affectionately. Lucas knew how much I wanted a child. While he was in the hospital, I imagine he was desperate, not knowing who would take care of you. He might have lied to make sure you came to me. I say that because if you were my son, I would have done the same. So I don't have a mother? Pierre asked sadly. Yes, you have a biological mother and an adoptive mother. My home is your home whenever you want. I know it's sudden, but in these few minutes we've spent together, I feel like you're my son. When you called me Mom, I cried because it's something I've always dreamed of. But even though I'm already a mother, your voice and your actions made me cry. What do you mean you're a mother? Pierre asked. Before Rosa could answer, the question was answered when a young boy and a young girl, both 12 years old, came home shouting. Imam! Lara! Jonas! How was school? Rosa asked. Imam was talking to some of her friends, and I'll talk to you in a bit, Rosa responded as the two headed to their rooms. I adopted 2 children a few years ago, Rosa explained, smiling. But this house is big and there's one more room available. Pierre smiled and hugged Rosa. First, I want you to tell me something, Pierre said. Do you know my biological mother? Rosa thought for a moment. I don't know her personally, but your father talked about her a lot. From what he told me, she was a very unpleasant person. Maybe that's why he didn't want you to know her or live with her. But if she still lives in the same place, I know the address. I need to meet her, Pierre said. So let's go. Rosa, Pierre, and Raphael drove to Livia's old address, Pierre's biological mother. They arrived at a dilapidated house that looked like it would collapse with any strong wind. There was only one man inside, who appeared to be drunk. Olivia's not here. If you're here to collect the money she owes, go ahead. If you want to collect from her, she's working at the bar on the corner. They went to the bar, but Pierre stayed outside. Only Rosa and Raphael went in. A few minutes later, they came out with Livia. Hey, kid, I'm sorry about your dad, Olivia said coldly. Hi, Mom, Pierre responded. You're not here for money, are you? Let me tell you right away that I don't have money to pay child support. No, I don't want child support. I just wanted to see how you were doing. Livia looked him in the eyes. I'm fine, kid. But tell me, did your dad leave any inheritance? Pierre, even at his young age, understood why his father had kept him away from her. He took a deep breath and replied. No. In fact, he left a bunch of debts. And since I'm underage, I think you're going to have to pay them. Livia's eyes widened and she ran off, shouting that she wasn't going to pay anything. Raphael and Rosa were worried about Livia's behavior and how Pierre would react. However, Pierre burst into laughter as he watched the woman run away. Did you just lie? Raphael asked, surprised. Yes, Pierre said, still laughing. That woman doesn't matter to me. She wasn't going to get my dad's money. After he stopped laughing, Pierre looked at Rosa and asked with a big smile. Is there really a room available at your house? Rosa laughed too. Of course there is. Just no girls in your room and no noise after 11. All right, I accept the conditions, Pierre said, smiling. The adoption process was quick. Rosa was a renowned doctor who had already adopted 2 children. Adding a third was a natural and familiar process for her. Pierre got along well with his new siblings and with Rosa, whom he now called Mom. He realized that bonds as strong as blood ties, though invisible, were unbreakable. 2 years later, Pierre went to the state prison. He was nervous, but he had to do this. He entered a room where Raphael was sitting, dressed in an orange prison uniform. When Raphael saw him, he lowered his head but soon looked him in the eyes. Hello, Raphael, Pierre said seriously. Hi, Pierre, Raphael responded. Pierre sighed. So it was you who hit me with the car. Raphael lowered his head. Yes, it was me. Why did you never tell me? Pierre asked more sternly. Raphael looked up at the ceiling and recalled the day of the accident. He was on his phone when he heard the noise. At first, he thought it was a dog or another animal, but when he realized it was a child, he panicked. As a nurse, he knew he should have administered first aid, but fear took over. He drove away faster than he had ever driven in his life. Raphael spent days consumed by guilt. The boy's face wouldn't leave his mind. Was he alive? Were they going to catch me? Would I go to jail? It was eating him up inside. Then, one night, Raphael saw the same boy outside the hospital alone. At first he thought it was a ghost, but he soon realized the boy was real. The wheelchair he was in was Raphael's fault. Raphael laughed, thinking about the coincidence. I'm being punished for what I did, he thought. But after seeing what Pierre went through, Raphael tried to turn his regret into redemption, although he doubted he would ever be forgiven. He quit his well-paying job to go to the orphanage and care for Pierre. He helped him find his mother and even get adopted. After Rosa adopted Pierre, Raphael still felt guilty and realized there was only one way to make it disappear, confessing what he did. He had already been in prison for years. Raphael looked at Pierre and asked, Why did you come to visit me after 2 years? Pierre thought for a moment. I tried to hate you, and for a moment I succeeded. But all I could think about were the good times we spent together, the advice you gave me, how you protected me from the other kids at the orphanage. I tried to be angry at you, but I couldn't. Raphael, emotional, started to cry. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Pierre looked at him and said, I don't know if you deserve it, but I'm giving you my forgiveness. Pierre smiled. Raphael couldn't believe it. After putting Pierre in a wheelchair, he was still treated with kindness. You're not human, you must be an angel, Raphael said. I'm no angel, I'm just trying to be a better person than I was yesterday, Pierre replied. And I think you've suffered enough wearing that orange uniform. It must be worse than being locked up in here. Raphael laughed. He couldn't believe this boy. The world doesn't deserve you, Pierre, Raphael said. Pierre smiled. When you get out of here, we have a lot of catching up to do, Pierre said excitedly. Maybe next year, Raphael replied. They talked a bit more and then their time was up. I'll be back next week, but before that I want to show you something, Pierre said. Raphael was curious. Then he couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Pierre stand up from his wheelchair and, with difficulty, walk over to him. His steps were steady and showed his triumph. When you get out of here next year, I'll be walking. And I want us to walk together to my house, Pierre declared. Deal, Raphael said, with a smile of happiness and redemption. Raphael couldn't stop crying. Seeing Pierre walk was what he wanted most in life. It was like witnessing a miracle before his eyes. Deal, Raphael repeated, with a smile of happiness and redemption.
And if you liked this video, subscribe to the channel, like, comment and share this story.